Welcome to this second installment of our new series dedicated exclusively to breaking down the advancements in the Chinese space sector. As regulars of the next framework in space already know, we are structuring our coverage so you don't miss absolutely anything. Every Saturday, you have your unmissable appointment with our exhaustive coverage of SpaceX news. On Thursdays, we dive into the rest of global space news, everything that has nothing to do with SpaceX or China. And of course, any technological development or breaking news that shatters the mold will be published right here, instantly. Before we dive into today's avalanche of data, I want to share something the team is pouring a ton of energy into. We are building a website that will go way beyond what you see in these videos. It is not going to be your typical news portal. Look, we are preparing an interactive section where you will be able to carry out space engineering projects using artificial intelligence algorithms. It is going to be an absolute playground for those of you who want to get your hands dirty with code and space data. Additionally, we are working hard on updating our CubeSat and Satellite design course, which we already published on our sister channel, The Next Framework in Engineering. So stay tuned because incredible tools are coming your way. And now, let's talk about low Earth orbit, because this week we brushed against tragedy and at the same time witnessed an unprecedented demonstration of logistical power. We had a real emergency on the Chinese space station, the Tiangong. During routine inspections prior to the return of the Shenzhou mission crew, sensors and cameras detected a structural crack in one of the re-entry capsule's windows. Stop for a second to think about what this means. During atmospheric re-entry, friction generates a plasma that envelops the ship at thousands of degrees Celsius. A structural failure in a window is not a minor setback. It would have caused the total disintegration of the capsule and the loss of the astronauts. Faced with this life-or-death crisis, the Chinese space program activated what they call their National Resource Mobilization System. And what happened next has left Western analysts taking notes. In an astonishing display of logistical agility, Beijing ordered the contingency launch of the Shenzhou 22 mission. This spacecraft, which was scheduled to fly months later, was prepped, mated to its carrier rocket, and launched in record time toward the Tiangong station to act as a literal lifeboat. The damaged capsule was sent back to Earth empty, so materials engineers could study the failure, while the crew returned safely. This operation proves something vital. China no longer just knows how to reach space. They have achieved extreme maturity in their infrastructure. They have the protocols, the redundant hardware, and the reaction speed to save lives when peering into the abyss. And speaking of the Tiangong, its future plans are massive. First, they are going to expand the station, going from the current 3 modules to 6, doubling its operational and scientific capacity. The second strategic step is the extension of its operational lifespan to over 15 years. And finally, the third major phase of this plan is opening its hatches to international astronauts. China, which we must remember was legally excluded from the International Space Station program, is now building the alternative platform in low Earth orbit and is inviting the world to join it. But low Earth orbit is just the departure port. China's true gaze is fixed on the moon, and they are not alone. We are witnessing the consolidation of a titanic strategic alliance between Russia and China to conquer our satellite and establish a permanent base. This is a project that for a long time was underestimated by the West, but today directly threatens to strip the United States of its space hegemony and rewrite the rules of the geopolitical game for the coming decades. The core of this plan is the International Lunar Research Station. It will be located at the moon's south pole. Why there? Because in the permanently shadowed craters of that region, there is frozen water. And in space, water is everything. If you separate it through hydrolysis, you get oxygen to breathe and hydrogen to use as rocket fuel. Whoever controls the lunar south pole will practically control the gas station of the solar system.
Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything from the space sector.
The Chinese timeline to achieve this is millimeter precise. First, at the end of this current year, we will see the orbital test flight of the new Mengzhu capsule in an uncrewed configuration. The second major milestone will arrive in 2027 with the inaugural flight of the massive Long March 10 Super Heavy launch vehicle capable of injecting 27 metric tons on a translunar trajectory. The third critical phase will be in 2028, executing a crewed circumlunar mission to pave the way. And finally, the fourth and definitive step will be the crewed lunar landing before 2030. The architecture of this mission will send 3 astronauts to lunar orbit, 2 of whom will descend to walk on the surface. Between 2030 and 2035, the main modules of the base will begin to arrive. But here is where the synergy with Russia comes in, and it is fascinating. The biggest challenge of a permanent lunar base is surviving the lunar night, which lasts 14 Earth days and where temperatures plummet to minus 170 degrees Celsius. Imagine trying to survive a winter night deep inside Antarctica, completely isolated. If you rely on conventional solar panels and batteries, the extreme cold will drain the energy quickly and you will freeze to death. You need a heavy, autonomous generator that does not depend on the sun. On the moon, the exact same thing happens. That is why between 2033 and 2035, the plan includes the construction of an autonomous nuclear power plant on the lunar surface. Russia is the world's leading expert in nuclear technology for extreme environments, like their icebreakers in the Arctic. They will build this reactor using robots, providing the heat and power that Chinese solar panels cannot deliver in the dark. It is a perfect alliance. China brings the financial muscle, the massive industrial capacity, the next-generation rockets, and an unwavering long-term vision. Russia brings its vast experience in life support, nuclear energy, and the motivation to show the world that Western sanctions have not isolated it. In fact, 17 countries, including Egypt, Pakistan, and Venezuela, have already joined this Russian-Chinese project, turning their backs on the NASA-led Artemis program. While this is happening, the American lunar program faces a sea of uncertainty, with budget cuts looming on the horizon and rumors about the possible cancellation of its lunar orbital space station, the Gateway. The space cooperation between Beijing and Moscow is the exact reflection of their Earthbound alliance, forged since 2014. We're talking about a competition that is no longer about planting a nylon flag in the dust, but about establishing a permanent human presence and exploiting resources in a domain where international laws are at best blurry. But it is not all confrontational geopolitics. Pure science also brings us spectacular news. Chinese scientists have just announced invaluable discoveries after analyzing the rocks brought back by the Chang'e 6 mission, the first and only samples ever collected from the far side of the moon in human history. These studies are shedding completely new light on lunar oxidation mechanisms, ancient volcanism, and solar wind interaction in areas that had never been touched. China has temporarily become the mecca of planetary geology. And despite the technological Cold War rhetoric, scientific bridges still hold. It has been confirmed that the SMILE probe has begun its transatlantic journey. This is a historic joint project between the European Space Agency, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the United Kingdom, which provided a crucial soft X-ray instrument. The probe is already aboard the cargo ship Colibri, crossing the Atlantic toward the Kourou base in French Guiana. Its launch in 2026 will allow Europe and China to study together how solar winds impact Earth's magnetic field. Furthermore, Chinese space science is about to take a colossal leap with its new space telescope, the CSST, also known as Xuntian. Its launch is scheduled between late 2026 and 2027, and it has a brutal tactical advantage. It will orbit about 400 kilometers above Earth, flying very close to the Tiangong space station. This means it will be able to dock with the station so astronauts can perform maintenance, repair components, or upgrade its instruments, extending its lifespan far beyond the originally planned 10 years. To help you understand its power, it is often compared to the legendary Hubble telescope. Although the Chinese telescope's mirror is slightly smaller at about 2 meters, its field of view is 300 times larger. With its 5 advanced instruments, it will map enormous portions of the universe to study dark energy, galactic evolution, and search for exoplanets. Now, how does China sustain this frantic pace of missions, space stations, telescopes, and lunar bases? The answer lies in the launch data, and it is a harsh slap of reality for the West. At the end of the year, China smashed its own annual record with 93 successful orbital launches. To put that into perspective, the specialized press has highlighted a devastating figure. China's launch cadence is almost 8 times higher than that of all of Europe combined during the same period. While the European Space Agency has suffered an ordeal of chronic delays with the Ariane 6 rocket and has been left without operational light vehicles, China maintains a deafening drumbeat driven by its tireless Long March fleet. They have standardized mass production processes and spectacular port logistics, especially from their island of Hainan. For European sector leaders, this is a very painful awakening. If Europe does not streamline its bureaucracy and drastically increase its budget, it will be relegated to a third-rate player in space access. But the Chinese state isn't doing this alone. Historically, space there was a monopoly of heavy state entities. However, ever since they opened the sector to private capital, we are seeing a revolution driven by an absolute obsession with SpaceX. Chinese private companies have realized that the journey is no longer the most expensive part of the mission. The expensive part is throwing the rocket in the trash. That is why companies like LandSpace are testing vertical landings in the Gobi Desert. Their Zhuche 3 commercial rocket uses liquid oxygen and methane engines, a technology very similar to Elon Musk's Raptor engines, and aims to emulate the recovery of the Falcon 9's first stage. But they go even further. The company Beijing Leading Rocket Technology has presented the Xingzhou 1 project. If you look at the designs, the fins, the fairing, and the tank proportions, it is an almost exact aesthetic and functional copy of SpaceX's Starship system. It is a prototype, yes, but it makes the roadmap clear. They're not going to reinvent the wheel. They are going to rapidly copy successful, proven designs to cut off decades of development time. And to top it off, this very week, it was reported that China is about to operationalize its first offshore marine platform built specifically for landing reusable rockets at sea, directly copying the concept of the drone ships that SpaceX uses in the oceans. Everything I've told you today, from the orbital rescue to the Starship clones and the lunar base with Russia, are not isolated events. It all obeys a macroeconomic and philosophical plan. Chinese space planners operate under a 100-year master plan designed for the colonization, exploitation, and economic dominance of the solar system. This project is named Tiangong Kaiwu, which poetically translates to the exploitation of the works of nature, taking its name from an ancient scientific encyclopedia from the Ming Dynasty. Aligned with the country's political vision, this plan justifies the absolute urgency to cheapen access to space. They don't want reusable rockets just for prestige. They want them because they are the necessary transport trucks for asteroid mining and for building immense space-based solar power plants in the coming decades. For China, winning this new space race isn't about getting there first to take a picture. It's about being the first to establish the trade routes, logistics, and mining infrastructure of humanity's next great economic frontier. They want to own the ports, shipyards, and highways of the solar system. And this is where I want to read you in the comments. Seeing this 100-year plan and the speed at which they're executing infrastructures, lunar bases, and copying reusable technology, do you think the West is underestimating China's ability to dominate the space economy of the future? Would you like me to dive deeper into how that asteroid mining would work in future videos of the series? Leave me your thoughts below, because I always read them. See you in the next video. Keep looking up.